and I will pass it over to my colleague Winston Sandino, who is going to give us a brief presentation of like what to expect around the 42nd replacement bridge replacement project, and then also walk us through, as mentioned in the description, what detours, what to expect, where construction is happening, and just overall having the ability for you all to have your questions answered. So Winston, unless you have any takes or questions, take it away.
Thank you very much, Maria, for putting this together. And thank you, everyone, for coming to this webinar. My name is Winston Sandino. I'm a project manager for PBOT. I was the project manager during the design of the 42nd bridge. I turned this over to a construction manager during construction, but I will be the point of contact for this project. And a little bit of overview of the 42nd bridge. The bridge has been having some deficiencies, structural deficiencies that needed to be replaced. We could not be fixing the bridge, and so we were looking for funds to replace the bridge. And in 2018, we had enough funds, and all the funds are actually city funds, no federal funds, to replace the bridge. And we started design in 2019, and it took about 2 years to complete the design. And we went out to bid, but the bids came a little bit high, and so we had to pause on the bridge, made some minor modifications, and we rebid the project, and we got a low bid. And the contractor is called Cascade Bridge. Cascade Bridge, it's a contractor that has done almost half of the bridges in Portland or in Oregon. So it's a well-known contractor that has done bridges in this area. So now I want to give you an overview of where the bridge is. That you're probably familiar with the area, but you can see in the map the kind of a light gray area. It's where the bridge is going to be replaced, and it goes over the Lombard Street, which is owned by Oregon State Department of Transportation. And it also goes over the Union Pacific Railroad on the north side. And we are not just replacing the bridge, we're also extending on the north side and on the south side for doing sidewalk and bike pedestrian facilities all the way up to Holman Street on the south side. And then we are matching the existing sidewalk and bike lanes on the north side. 42nd Avenue was built, I believe, in 2009. I also worked on that project many years ago, and then we did that intersection. So all that section there is basically, recently constructed. So we're just going to match at that intersection. Maria, if you can put another slide that had the cross section of the bridge, or not the cross section, but the first picture where the picture of the bridge. I think it was the first one.
Is this the one that you're seeing now?
No, the actual picture of the bridge, I believe, is the first one. Up, the first. Yes, the first one. Yes, thank you very much. And so I wanted to bring this picture up so everybody understand what we're doing. This is the bridge, and that's Lombard Street. And then on the right side, at least on my side, it's the Union Pacific Railroad. And I wanted to explain a little bit about this section. So when we finish the webinar, you'll have questions about Lombard Street, the bridge, and other areas. So I wanted to explain a little bit more in here. You can see that the bridge has about 4 walls that support the bridge. The first one you see, it's over Lombard Street. You have 2 walls, and then you have kind of a guardrail, and then you have 2 walls that are in between the railroad. So that's what we call it, spans. So it's a 4-span bridge right now. And when we are done with this bridge, when we tear it down and then we build a new one, it's only going to be a 2-span bridge. And then I will explain that in the next cross section that we'll have. But I wanted to go a little bit about Lombard Street. If you remember, or if you heard the news, there was a fatality on Lombard Street on a bicyclist that was on the it would be on your left screen. There's a bike lane. You see some orange cones. So the Oregon Department of Transportation saw this opportunity to add some funds to widen a little bit Lombard as part of this project. So I just wanted to mention that we are going to be widening a little bit on the left and the right side of Lombard Street to add bike facilities or some kind of a shoulder on the right side. So we're doing that as part of this project. And then ODOT will have more right away or more space to widen in the future. The other thing that I wanted to mention, you probably see that typically a bridge is a straight bridge. Most bridges are pretty much straight. Well, this is not really a straight bridge. It's a curved with the super elevation bridge. So it's not really a simple bridge to construct. And I will explain that in the next slides, but I wanted to kind of explain. Also, look at the utilities, overhead utilities on the left side and the right side. So there are some utilities that needed to be relocated before and some during construction. There's also underground utilities that have some conflicts with the new columns. So that's kind of an overview, a little bit of technical overview, but that's kind of what we're doing on this project. Let's move down to the next slide, please. The next would be the cross section. Yes, thank you. So now that you saw the picture, this is the new proposed bridge. So the new proposed bridge is only going to have 1 column in the middle, which is dividing Lombard Street and the railroad. So the installation of this bridge will have steel beams as large as 140 feet long that will be erected with a crane and installed in this bridge. So that would be done over Lombard Street and then over the Union Pacific Railroad. And to do that, we need to close the Lombard Street and the Union Pacific Railroad. To do that, we need to have 4 weekends to do that work. Let's see what else in this. We're going to have a street lights on the bridge and a protected fence. We'll have sidewalks, bike lanes on the bridge. I think that's it. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Portland Bureau of Transportation is constructing a new earthquake resilient bridge on Northeast 42nd Avenue that will be providing a better, safer access for pedestrians, cyclists, and freight. The new bridge will let's see, will also have a sidewalk and bike lanes going to the South Holman neighborhood. The project will start demoing at this point on August 11th. And it will take between 1.5 to 2 years to build. Next slide, please. Okay, during construction, we need to have a detour because the bridge will be completely demo, and you will not be able to use this bridge for, like I said, 1.5 to 2 years. And so we put together a detour for the project, and we'll explain that in the next slide. But basically, for general vehicle traffic, we're talking about cars and small trucks like FedEx, UPS, Amazon. Those small cars can use 33rd Avenue, 60th Avenue, Colley, and all the way to 82nd. But for freight vehicles longer than 50 feet or trucks and trailers, for northbound freight, they need to take Killingsworth Street, and then they have to go east to 82nd Avenue, and then north to Columbia Boulevard. And then for southbound freight, they will take Columbia Boulevard east to Northeast Colley Boulevard, and then south to Killingsworth. Next slide, please. So we put this very simple map, and I'm saying very simple. If you actually look at the traffic control when the contractor start putting the signs and message board, it's going to be more detail about where to go. But in this case, you have the blue line, which is the northbound detour, and then the orange is the southbound detour. So for traffic coming southbound, you can see the blue line coming 42nd. They would not be able to go all the way to cross the bridge. So they have to go Killingsworth to the east, all the way to 82nd Avenue, and then take Columbia to 47th. And the reason we're doing that, and this is only for trucks larger than 50 feet. So big trucks with trailers, or let's say containers. So they have to go all the way to 82nd. And you might say, why don't I take Colley Boulevard or 60th? Well, the reason is 60th is basically a local street, and Colley is an arterial but doesn't have a signal. And then 60th also has the railroad over, and the height restriction is not high enough that trucks will not be able to go over that, under that. So they have to go 82nd Avenue. So that's kind of the detour for big trucks. If you're in a small car, obviously you can do Colley, you can do 60th, and you can go all the way to 82nd. Most people would probably take 60th because 60th has a signal at Columbia, and Colley doesn't have that. And then if you're coming 47th Avenue southbound, then you'll have to go, in this case, you'll go Colley. It's easier to do a right turn lane then a left turn lane. So in this case, we'll send them to Collie, or if they cannot go to Collie, they go all the way to 82nd again. But for any other cars, they can actually take 60th, since, like I mentioned before, it has a signal and it's probably the most used street. In fact, 60th Avenue and Collie have about the same amount of traffic volume, but 60th takes more cars because of the signal, and then Collie has a more height capacity for trucks. I also wanted to mention, you see the two X's in the little piece in there, that's where the bridge is closed. So for the neighborhood east of 42nd, between 42nd and 60th, and Killingsworth and Lombard, basically that section in there, they will have access to their homes up to the first X that you see there. They will have some signs, especially that small area at the southeast side of the bridge. There are some apartments, and they will have local access to that area. They can come and turn left and then go 42nd south. The other one access to mention is that Lombard Street will have the off-ramp open. You can barely see in here, but I'll show you in another graphic that I have. People coming from Lombard, they can go take the Lombard 42nd exit and then come south. They will not be able to go on the on-ramp to Lombard, but they will have the off-ramp. Let's see, I think that's about it for Detour. Next slide, please. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about construction staging and tree protection. The tree protection is, I wanted to mention this because it has been a talk of a conversation for the neighborhood in the area. There was a community of people that joined together to plant some trees in this area near the bridge, and we had this conversation and coordinated with them so we can protect these trees. So there's I'm going to be talking about geometric figures. There's triangle and then a semi-circle area. The triangle below the ramps, and I'll show that in a graphic next. Those trees are going to be protected completely. So the contractor, I believe, already installed fencing around that triangle, and we actually put in the plans and specifications that nobody can use that, because there were some conversations with the community that they were worried that the contractor was going to use that for staging and park cars. So no, that area, the triangle area, is going to be fenced off, and not even the contractor is going to be using that area. Then the semicircle area, which is north of that triangle between the ramps and Lombard, some trees are going to be protected and some are going to be removed. Yes, thank you. You can see the triangle area down below. That area, it says no staging or parking allowed, and all those trees are going to be protected. And then the semicircle area between the ramp and Lombard, more or less half of those trees are going to be protected. And the other half, which is kind of the rectangular brownish area, we compromise and we have to remove some of the trees, and some, you can see, are going to be protected. And I believe we already have somebody removing some of the trees and replanting them someplace near the area. So we're trying to save some of the trees and replant them. And then other trees will be cut, but at the end of the project, we will work with this tree growth group to replant those trees. And so you will be asking, why are we cutting those trees in that area? Well, that is to have that specific area for the contractor to build the bridge. As I mentioned before, and I showed the picture and the cross section of the bridge, it's not a simple bridge. It's a curved bridge, and it goes over the Lombard Street, which is a state highway, and then the Union Pacific Railroad on the north side. And so the bridge is going to be demolished, which would be the first weekend closure. So that means Lombard will be closed completely from Friday all the way to Monday morning. And during that weekend, the contractor is going to tear down the bridge, basically. And then we have 3 more weekends allowed by the state to close Lombard and then continue working on the project. So the following weekend closure, which we don't know exactly when that is going to happen until later on, that's when the contractor is going to bring those pretty long I-beams, steel beams, which are depicted there in the drafting. And so those steel beams are, because they are curved, they are not really, it's difficult to install them single. So they are going to be in pairs and attached together with some kind of a frame for stability. And so there's going to be 2 I-beams, and then they are going to be transported from there and being installed at the bridge with the large crane. And as you can see, this is a very difficult installation. And like I mentioned, there are some utilities, overhead utilities. There's underground utilities that we have to protect during the installation of these steel beams. So why do we have 4 weekends? The first week, demolished. The second weekend, we're planning to do the Lombard beam installation. The following weekend, the third weekend closure, we'll try to do the Union Pacific Railroad steel beam installation. And then the fourth weekend, if we have issues, because there's always unknowns, then we will have that weekend to complete the rest of the bridge installation. Now, those are the 4 weekends just to install the steel beams. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. There's retaining walls, there is sidewalk, there is stormwater, there's paving. The bridge is going to be elevated a little bit, about 2 feet. So to meet the clearance, the new updated clearance for Lombard, which is 18 feet, and then 23.4 for the Union Pacific Railroad. So the bridge had to be raised a little bit to comply with those height restrictions. And because we did that, then we had to extend that on the south side and on the north side of the bridge. And so we have to do some paving, sidewalk, bike lanes, and so forth. Let's see, you can tell the ramp will be closed, so you cannot go on the on-ramp. And then you can see some of the houses on that south, that area of the bridge. So they will be having access to those houses, so they can come in northbound. They can go into the houses, but then when they get out, they can only go left. And there's always going to be somebody from the construction crew to let them in and out, and they'll have communications with them. Let's see what's next. I think that's about it. Next slide, please. Yes, that's pretty much in a nutshell the project. There's more to talk about. So if you have any questions that were not addressed during this presentation, I'm glad to answer all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Winston. There are a couple of questions in the chat, and so I'll ask folks if they would want to chime in and ask their question aloud, or I'm happy to also ask the question itself. But we do have a question from Holly. Holly, do you want to come up and ask your questions? I'm happy to also just read your chats.
There. You can go ahead and read the chats. I mean, I'm
Okay.
that's fine.
Sounds good. Awesome. So the first question, Winston, is with the seismic upgrade, how are we able to reduce the number of supports, new materials, different design, etc.?
Yeah, very good question. Very good question. It has been a long time since we have done these bridges. If you are familiar with one example, it's pipes. We used to do pipes with terracotta back in the days, and then later concrete. And then now the new pipes are PVC pipes, which are very, very, very strong and easy to install. So this is the same for this bridge. The steel is very strong and for compression and deflection. So it's a very easy installation. And the new supports for the bridge, it's going to be drill shafts, what we call it, which is it's basically a huge column with rebar in the middle that they can be placed next to each other, making it like a wall, but it's actually a series of piles. So that's the new design. It's using a lot of steel.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly, for your question. I'll just go through the list in the chat, and then at a point, I will just ask you if you wanted to ask aloud, but I'll continue and say, Jasmine, thank you for your question as well. Will construction workers be parking in the surrounding neighborhood, or do they have a designated parking lot? This was answered a little bit in the presentation, but I wanted to make sure if you had any additional question to that.
I can answer that. We were, of course, aware that there are some areas, especially on that triangle area, where there have been some parking by other people. And the triangle area and the semicircle area, it's actually owned by the Oregon Department of Transportation. And the reason they own that is because they built those ramps, which is a ramp coming from Lombard, which is a state highway. So they own those two lots. But we work together with the state to make sure that that area is not being used during construction. So if there's another area in there that it's a private lot or public, the contractor has to discuss that with whoever the owner is. And if they want to rent the space, for example, that green area just south of the bridge where the Fernhill Crossing area, you can see that that's private. And if they want to clean that and talk to the property owner to use that as a staging, that's up to the contractor to talk to them. And if the private owner says, yeah, I'll rent this to you for this much, then it's fine. That we cannot do anything about it. The area where the triangle is, we discussed that with ODOT, and then we told them we were going to fence that off and protect it, and ODOT was okay with that. So those two areas will be protected and only staging for the contractor in the brownish area that I showed. And I think the question is mostly on 42nd Avenue. I believe if you can zoom in, Maria, I think that's where see all the cars in the it's a little bit south. South of that, I mean, below in the triangle area. Yeah, where you have the Nesica apartments. Yes, you can see all those cars parked in there. So I believe that's the concern of the residents in the area. You can see how many cars there are parked now, and I believe they were probably concerned that now we're going to have equipment and construction. So that's fenced off already, I believe. So that's not going to be used for anything. Not even the contractor can use that, and it would be protected. If I don't know if there's another area that people are going to be parking, but there's basically no area to park. So I think the contractor will be using the just the staging that I mentioned earlier between the on-ramp and Lombard. I hope that answered the question.
Jasmine, did that question get answered for you, or do you have any additional question to add to that? All right. We'll assume none. Feel free to chime in at any point once I call your question to clarify if I miss anything on there as well. There's just a few comments, Winston, around, how the Killingsworth 42nd Avenue intersection is terrible, capital letters, place for trucks under 50 inches to turn any direction. And so why are trucks over 50 feet using 42nd Avenue in the first place? To that question, as well as 42nd and Fremont limits what can move up 42nd. So again, the question from Ted is, why are trucks over 50 feet using 42nd Avenue in the first place?
That is a good question. In fact, there are not that many because the bridge has been restricted to weight. So maybe they are longer trucks, but if the weight is more than the capacity, they cannot go over the 42nd bridge. And I don't think there's that many trucks going now on 42nd Avenue. There's about 5,000 cars going through the bridge right now, and a small percentage of those 5,000 cars are actually trucks. But we need to have a detour for large trucks and trailers, for example, to go this other route.
Thanks, Winston. Just to follow up, to the next question, you mentioned this briefly, but just wanted to make sure that it's correct. There's no identification of dates yet for the demo weekend closure yet. It's fully scheduled. Is that correct?
Yes, and let me explain a little bit more about why this has been kind of pushed out a little bit. So originally we were going to close on the July 21st, and then we moved it to August 4th, and then now it's August 11th. And so I can see why people are concerned, and they are probably saying you guys don't know what you're doing, or I don't know what else. But it's not as simple as you can imagine. The contractor it's a very good contractor. They have done a lot of bridges in the area, and they know the how to navigate the permit and with the Union Pacific Railroad and the state. So, for example, the Union Pacific Railroad, they need to know exactly the methods of construction or the demolition, how far you're going to be from the tracks, how many people are you going to have in the area, what time are you going to start, what time are you going to finish, what are you going to do with that window, and then they have to see how many trains are coming during that time, and then how are they going to flag? So there's a lot of things that it's happening to be able to demolish this bridge. And so you're talking about two agencies, pretty powerful agencies with different standards for construction. You have the state, the Oregon Department of Transportation with Lombard, and then you also have the Union Pacific Railroad. So you have two agencies that you have to navigate the permit. ODOT is going to say, well, you can do these, but then the railroad said, no, you cannot do this. You have to do it this way. So they have been working with these two agencies to try to do the method of demolition and construction and erection of the bridge. And so it has not been that easy. That's one thing. And the other thing is the utilities. So there's several utilities that are in this area. There's PGE, there is Comcast, there is communications. And just so you understand how the utility relocation works, the higher elevation is the power line, so PGE or PPNL. And then below that, they start having the communications and then other lines. And so now you're talking to five or 3 or 4 different companies. And so they have to relocate the first one. And then once the first that's relocated, then the other one can be relocated. And then once they are all relocated, then the pole can be removed. And then, so it's not as simple as it seems. So we're doing the best we can to get these communications and these permits from all these different agencies and private utility companies, so we can start the project. So once we have all those permits, demolition is going to start. At this point, we have August 11th, and then once they do that, they'll do other work. They'll be closing one lane on Lombard, and then they'll do retaining walls and other things. They can do other things. And then when they are ready to do the installation of the steel beams, then we'll know ahead of time when that's going to happen. And we'll, of course, do a traffic advisory at the time, and then we'll inform the neighborhood as well. And we'll be updating our website, probably bi-weekly or by month.
Awesome. Thank you, Winston. And yes, we will continue to send updates as they come along as quickly as we're able. So thank you for that. So Seth, feel free to jump in as well if you have additional questions to the question that I'm about to ask, which says, to travel west from 42nd to Columbia, the only option is to use 33rd Bridge. How safe is the bridge for a lot of traffic? Turning left from 42nd onto Lombard is not safe.
Yes. You probably remember that the 33rd Bridge was closed for a while. We did a lot of maintenance on that bridge, and now the bridge was reopened again to cars and trucks. There's some restriction, but yes, you can use 33rd Bridge. And yes, it is. You have very minimal options here. You have 33rd Bridge on the west side, and then on the east side you have 60th, and then Coley, and then you have 82nd. Yes, there's not really that many options, but those are the options that we have for cars and small trucks. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so Seth, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, at one time, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. At one time, there was talk about a traffic light on Lombard on by 42nd. Whatever happened to that?
What was that again? A traffic
light on Lombard and 42nd.
Oh, yes. Well, that was just a conversation we had with ODOT at the time when we were doing the design, and the community asked about this triangle area. There were so many things, so many ideas that came up with the community. Some people wanted to protect the trees. There was a community that said, don't touch that, just leave the trees in there. But there was another part of the community that wanted to actually maybe cut some of the trees and actually use that area as a neighborhood gathering, or do kind of a farmer's market or something. And then the other option was to give that triangle, ODOT to give the jurisdictional transfer to the city of Portland. And then if that would happen, then there was a thinking of a plan to modify those ramps. And one of the planning things that people were talking about was to, instead of having this, you can see 42nd on-ramp that goes to the 42nd Bridge, and then you have the 42nd that off-ramp that goes south to 42nd Avenue to the Holman Street, I think is the next street. Yes, Holman. So the plan was to combine those two, eliminate the one that goes northbound, and also eliminate the one that goes out to Holman, and cut right in the middle of the triangle, and then make it a right angle, a T intersection on 42nd Avenue. And so that's a safer stop. And then the visibility, you can just turn left or right instead of trying to look back. So that's one. And then if we were able to do that, then we would eliminate those two ramps, the on-ramp and off-ramp. They will have only one, and have a signal at Lombard. So that was kind of the idea. And it could be a plan in the future, but for that, there needs to be conversations with ODOT and PBOT, because like I said, ODOT owns Lombard Street, those ramps. PBOT owns 42nd Avenue. So if we can have a conversation with the state and the city, and funding, which is the most important thing, to have funding to do that kind of project, it's just in the planning stages right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. One more question, and we'll keep going to your questions, y'all. Thank you for being super patient. I appreciate it. Next question from Holly. Will a safe area be marked off for rubberneckers? I mean, people who will like to observe the demo and construction. It sounds like a very interesting project. Thanks for that question, Holly.
Well, yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's why the bridge is going to be closed completely.
It's better than TV.
So Lombard will be completely closed. So nobody will have access that weekend when they are doing the work. Maybe some people from the south, from Holman up to the Nessica apartments might be able to go closer, maybe, but like I said, it's going to be closed. So, but we are working with our communication team is going to be filming the project for the entire construction, the 4 weekends. So we'll have drones and a time lapse of the demolition and the erection of the bridge on both sides, on Lombard and Union Pacific Railroad, and then we'll post those in our website so you can see how it was built.
I guess that will content me. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. All right, Winston, let's continue. Questions from Rolf. Again, feel free to chime in as well. It says, nothing has been listed as an alternative that is currently upkept to safe traversable standards. I know this because I broke my femur trying to traverse this route in February, and nothing has been done for years. Follow-up question to that is I am here to make sure we are going to have a safe bicycle route alternatives as the sidewalks in either direction from 33rd to 60th and Columbia is dangerously neglected and overgrowth with shrubbery, broken sidewalks, glass, and vehicle debris. And we'll just have folks who agree with that, and then I'll follow up after that. But Winston, if you can chime in on that.
I didn't quite understand the question. So are you talking about 42nd Avenue? You're talking 33rd?
Go for it, Rolf.
On Columbia, the current proposed stated alternative routes for pedestrians and bicyclists are to go down Columbia to 33rd and do the spiral loop and go up 33rd and then continue into the residential neighborhood, or to go down the other way down Columbia to 60th and then cross up. Both of the areas along Columbia are completely unkempt and with broken sidewalk parts that go in different directions, and bushes that are overgrown, and vehicle debris that fall off of passing speeding vehicles. In February, I broke my femur trying to walk from Bryant Street to 33rd along where the old golf course used to be, that's now an empty lot for several years. All of that is completely overgrown and broken and like almost not traversable by foot at all, let alone pushing a bicycle, let alone finding somebody coming in the opposite direction, let alone pushing a grocery cart or laundry cart, let alone trying to get that way via like a personal ambulatory device like a wheelchair. It's completely impassable that way. 60th is a little bit better, but the sidewalks are all broken up and there's still debris and glass everywhere. And it's not well lit at night, and there are many places where people can get hurt. I have already gotten hurt, but I had no legal recourse in the particular case. But if the increased traffic is going to happen, bad things are going to happen. People are going to get hurt if they are traveling these new ways. And I want to see that not happen. the last construction that happened on Columbia was supposed to take 10 months and it took 2 years. And they made it even more dangerous to try and get between Bryant Street and 42nd Street along Columbia. And people were injuring themselves just trying to cross their construction zone because they had no choice. So I just want to make sure that this is going to be addressed if this is going to take as long as it is, because people will get hurt. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much for that. We will try, and it's a good question, and we will try to address that within our project limits. We are going to be talking to the traffic engineer and then see the routes and see if we can work with our maintenance and ODOT maintenance to see if we can cut some trees or not trees, but bushes or areas that are
Sure. Yeah, it
impeding
would
the
take
traffic.
literally a team of 3 people, like a couple of days to take care of, for like bare minimum, like just one person with a garbage bag, one person with a leaf blower, and one person with a weed whacker, and it would improve things, I would say 70%. Like the sidewalk, like being broken is it is what it is right now, but like it would make it more functional and less unsafe, and it wouldn't take very much.
I appreciate that. And if you can, you have my email in there. If you can send me an email with more detail explanation and areas, I can probably discuss that with our group, with our maintenance group, with our contractor, our traffic engineers. There are different ways that I can probably help you out on that. And you're talking about bicycling and also pedestrian.
Yes, like
Okay.
just any way for a human scale movement to happen with the proposed reroutes.
Yeah. And you know, I'm really sorry about this. Routes for bicyclists is, we discussed this with several engineers, traffic engineers, to see what was the best way to route bicyclists through this during this construction, and it's very hard. There's really not. Same for traffic. There's really no good route or easy route for bicyclists, and because Colombia doesn't have bike lanes, and I don't think we want bicyclists on Colombia. It's very dangerous. It's a freight route. It's in the national highway system. But we decided to do Killingsworth to protect those bike lanes. But yes, it's and one of our traffic engineers put it in a good way. I don't ski. I don't do ski, but he said we should actually name those the bike routes like they do in the bike lifts. Green, I think it's blue, and then black diamond and double black diamond, which is the type of bicyclists that use that kind of route. And so this route they consider like a double black diamond. It's a very, very hard bike route. So a person with a little kid, it's not family friendly. People with kids are not doing this type of bike rides. So it's mostly for more professional bikers that have, can do this route, and it's very hard to find a safe route. Once all these projects are done, it's going to be a very good bike and pedestrian route, because we're not doing just this 42nd Avenue project. We're also doing other projects in the area, like Collie and Alderwood. We're going to be doing signals and bike lanes, but that's another project. But yeah, during the closing, it's not going to be easy.
Thanks, Winston. What it sounds like, and there are a couple of other questions. So for the sake of time and just being mindful that there are a couple other more questions for us, for you, Winston. It does sound like there are key components to providing alternatives and or efforts for bicycling routing, and like what would that make it safer? So definitely something to follow up. I'm looking at Ryan's comment as well, where he's agreeing with Rolf around understanding his options as a bicyclist and getting to Whitaker Ponds area. So that's another example. I don't know if you have like a brief comment as well to that on the route, or if it's similar to what you just shared.
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty much we looked at the map, we looked at all the different, there's some access to the north side, but then there's no road that goes all the way to like the airport, or so there's kind of like dead ends. And the reasons, you also have the Columbia Slough. So there's not a good connection coming from the south of Lombard, Colombian, to move to the north side. It's very hard. So bicyclists who have experience and know the area, they'll choose the route that is better for them. It's really hard for us to put a detour because the options are really they're very restricted.
Thank you for that. Rolf, I'm happy to give you the mic back if you are wanting to ask another question based on your comments. Otherwise, I can also head on to the next question.
No, we're good. I just hadn't turned off the hand waving button. Sorry.
It was a legacy hand, as we like to call it. I appreciate that. Awesome. So next is Ted. 42nd Avenue is very much a residential combined with commercial space. The closure of 33rd has already tipped traffic our direction. Why on earth is this corridor becoming more commercial? I suggest that one of your project coordinators actually drive this area and consider how trucks under 50, greater than 50, I should say, work or do not work within actual constraints. So the question being, why on earth is this corridor becoming more commercial?
I don't know. I mean, all I can see in this area, I don't know if I'm not going to disagree with him. I don't live in the neighborhood, so I don't know. But what I know, because I also have another project south of Holman, which we're going to be building sidewalks. All I see is a lot of residential houses. If you look at the map and you go south of the Holman, you're going to see more. That's the new apartment. You can see that apartment on Ainsworth. Those are brand new apartment units. And if you keep going down, there's more apartment units. You can see those. In fact, we were going to be building sidewalks in there, and then these new developers build those apartments. So it's mostly residential area. So I don't know why the question is mentioned commercial.
Yeah, we can definitely, and Ted, feel free to jump in as your next question is also, is there data on how many trucks use 42nd Avenue?
We can come up with that number. Like I mentioned before, we have about 5,000 cars going over the 42nd Bridge right now, and there's a small percentage of trucks that but I can come up with that data.
So we will certainly follow up. Next question, will this project increase the number of semi-trucks whizzing through our neighborhood, one that has multiple schools and many pedestrians going to restaurants and the farmers 42nd Avenue. The safety of our street has declined immensely since the closure of the 33rd Avenue Bridge project, and I feel this new bridge on 42nd Avenue will only increase the amount of the trucks and vehicles driving on 42nd Avenue.
Yes, that's a very good question. And what we're going to do is we're going to be monitoring some of the streets. It would be a kind of a complaint driven. If you see a lot of traffic going through your street, let's say, for example, Holman or Ainsworth, and we think it's because of closing of 42nd, then we will take a look at that and see what we can do. But at this point we just don't know where the traffic is going to go, because people are going to choose whatever route they are going to. If they're going to the east side on the neighborhood, they might take Holman. They might, if they go to this side, I don't know, they might take Ainsworth. We just don't know at this point. People are going to do whatever is easier for them to do. And so, but as the project follows and we look at the traffic and receive complaints, this road it's packed with cars, and then we can see what's happening. We can measure with hoses and traffic volume, and there's ways to kind of mitigate that.
Thank you, Winston. One more comment related to some that have already been addressed by you. It wasn't very long that there was talked about making 42nd Avenue a walking street. This seems to push that a number of years down the road. I don't recommend riding on Columbia either, but how do we get from Northeast PDX, Northeast Portland to Marine Drive? There are barriers between the things that are supposed to be accessible.
Well, this project, you're talking north of Cornfoot, I'm assuming. This project will be doing sidewalk and bike lanes from Holman all the way to Columbia, to 47th, and then 47th Avenue was already built. And then that 47th Avenue has protected, I think it's a bike multi-use path. No, it's 47. No, 47 north of Lombard, I believe. That project was completed, yes. So that project was completed, and it goes all the way to Cornfoot. I have another project coming up, which is Cornfoot. We're going to be building a multi-use path on the north side of Cornfoot that goes all the way to Alderwood, and then Alderwood to 82nd and the airport. So there is going to be this is one of the missing links for bikes and pedestrians. So when the project is completed, there's going to be bikes and sidewalks all the way from basically from Killingsworth, 47 to 42nd, 42nd to 47th, all the way to Cornfoot, and then 82nd and all the way to the airport. So what area are you, what's the concern on this area?
No, I think the question was like if there was an alternative path to getting from Northeast PDX to Marine Drive, Winston.
Okay.
That was the question. Yeah.
That's
and
north of the project.
Yeah. Ted, feel free to jump in as well if I am not capturing the question correctly. Yeah, I can definitely take you off mute if you prefer, but you're most certainly able to do that as well if you're able to. But anytime, feel free to chime in. In any given case, if you're able to, we can jump to the next question and maybe we can continue to come back. I did posted the link that could help maybe answer some of those questions, Ted, as well, around the next project, the project that Winston is referencing, which is a Northeast Cornfoot Road corridor improvements from 47th Avenue to Alderwood Road. So the link is in the chat, and we'll make sure that we also follow up with all the different projects that are happening alongside this project to kind of give you all a little bit of a glance around the different improvements and also projects that will most likely be taking place in a similar time frame, but obviously all will differ as they're all due for change depending on many factors. So as we continue with the conversation, there's one more question as well. That is, what is the total project cost, Winston?
The total project cost is about 25 million. And that includes soft cost and so what we're saying soft cost is like a design and construction engineering, overseeing the project, and then the actual construction, the materials of the project is all included. But the construction cost came up to about 17 million. A little bit over $16 million. And all this is city funding, no federal funds.
Awesome. So those are all the questions on our chat. There's definitely an opportunity. If you have a question, you are more than welcome to raise your hand or continue to put any additional questions in the chat. So let us know if we can answer and provide any additional information. As you do that, and if you do decide to raise your hand, feel free to do so. I'll just walk us a little bit through what next steps look like. So next steps is thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll put together the recording and make sure that the questions that you all ask here, we can also put them in a FAQ page so that folks are able to access those directly. They will be going to our website, and I will plug in the website, the project website one more time here. It's coming up in the chat, but you can see it as well. And then, as you know, Winston is the project manager for this, and feel free to email, call Winston if you have any additional questions or concerns as well. I just posted his contact information as well in the chat. So that will be sort of like next steps. Because the project is scheduled to close on August 11th, we'll be sending also another reminder of the closure, and then we'll definitely add all the links associated, not just to the recording, but also other links associated to the other projects that are happening around the neighborhood, including but not limited, again, to the Northeast Cornfoot, thank you, that Winston talked about. Additionally, there's other projects that are also happening on Killingsworth, which include the repaving of Northeast Killingsworth that is scheduled to come later in the fall. Mimi Phillips is the project manager on that one. So what I'll make sure that we do, I should say, is in the recording and then in the documents that we'll share out, I'll make sure to add the other projects updates as we have them. So you are also able to have those as well with information for each of the project managers that work on each of those projects. So I want to say right now on the top of my head, I count up to 5. There's probably more, and there most likely are more. And so I just want to make sure that you all are seeing that within the scope of the mapping around the neighborhood. And so those are the next plans. You should expect that no later than early next week as well. And we'll try to get that as soon as out of the door as soon as possible. So yeah, I just want to demonstrate a huge amount of appreciation for taking the time tonight and joining us. And again, feel free to reach out to Winston for any questions, email, phone number. And I'm also happy to answer any questions for you. So if you yourself know community members who are also maybe shy away from reaching out, I'm also available. And I both Winston and I speak Spanish as well. So we're more than happy to use our linguistic skills to answer any questions as well if you know family or members who may not necessarily connect relatively quicker with us. So again, just amount of gratitudes and thank you for your patience on this project and thank you for your interest in learning more about the project as well. So seeing that there are no questions anymore, we can certainly give folks back
I
a
had
few
one question.
minutes. Go for it. This is your time.
If the project is going to last 1 to 1.5 years, and you've identified when the first weekend of closure will be, which will be next month, do you have any idea when the second and third ones will be? And I know the fourth one you mentioned is kind of an unknown catch-all, but the second and third ones are pretty specific for installing those large spans. First over the
Yes.
Lombard, second over the BPRR. So any idea when those might occur? Thank you.
Well, the contractor has to put a schedule for the 2 years, 1.5 years to 2 years, and they have some tentative dates that they just put in there. And then the first one is, I think it's in January or February of next year, the first, the next weekend closure. So that's not going to happen after, next year. And then following that, it would be probably close to February will be the other closure. But we will have when we have specific dates or very close dates or a month, we will post that in our website. We'll do a traffic advisory and then potentially postcards. So it's going to be a big deal when they do that. So you'll know when they
Would those be pretty
that.
in a way, would they be consecutive? One is 1 month, one is the next month, or would they be spread apart by 10 months?
No, not 10 months. I think the idea, like I explained before, is to do one section first, Lombard, and then move to the next section, which is the Union Pacific Railroad. And so between getting all the permits and everything worked out with the different agents, it might take, a month or 2 months maybe. But my guess is that once they install the steel beams on Lombard, they'll probably have to set them up and then do maybe another month or so to fix those beams, and then they'll move on to the next one. And it would be probably a couple months. It's not going to be 10 months because they also have a window when to finish this project within those two agencies, ODOT and the railroad. So I'm just assuming it's going to be maybe 2 or 3 months between the weekend closures. But the next one is scheduled for beginning of next year.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. Winston. So
Thank you
appreciated
all.
everyone.
Yeah, next question. I'm excited. I'm happy actually that you all are taking time to ask us all the questions. I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot more, so thank you again. Question, Winston from Jasper, is one minor point for cyclists. Some bridges have expansion joints that are raised and very unpleasant for biking. Is there any way to levy for zero profile expansion joints for bikes / pedestrians?
I cannot guarantee zero profile, but I can find out a little bit more about how we're going to do those joints. You need, because concrete, expands and contracts during, weather when it's too hot. So we have to have those. That's just the way bridges work. But we can try to see if there's any way that we can minimize that. So let me talk to our bridge engineer and see what they have for those. And so I don't know if I mentioned, but on the east side of the bridge, the east side is going to have a wider sidewalk. It's going to be a 10-foot multi-use path. So that's basically where all the houses and commercial buildings on the north side of the bridge are. There's nothing on the east side, but on the east side there is already a bike lane from 47 towards the bridge, and so we're gonna keep that lane, and then we're gonna raise that bike lane to a 7-foot sidewalk on the east side of the bridge, and then to a bike lane where the ramps and the triangle is. So we're gonna have a multi-use path and a 7-foot bike lane, protected bike lane on the east side.
Awesome. Thank you, Winston. So definitely feels like a follow-up. I just, the idea that's coming up to my head at the moment is with that Q&A will most certainly also indicate if there are any new updates once Winston is able to go back and check in with all the teams that he has to check with. So Jasper, thank you for that question. If there's any others, feel free to chime in. The one other thing that I wanted to, Jasper, you have a question. Go for it.
Sure, since we're talking about the bike lane. So I'm thinking about when you're going south from 47th, there's a bike lane on, you're following my directions there, going south on 47th, there is a bike lane on the right there?
Yes, actually, do you have, let me see, I think I have, let me look at the website, because I think the website shows the cross sections of the bridge. Yes. Okay. Can I share?
Yeah, Winston, feel free to share. Yes, you can.
Let's see. How do I? Okay, share.
Go for it.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Oh, hold on.
Something's happening.
We're almost there. There you go.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so this is the website. You can see that it's there right now. This is north of the bridge. Okay, so when you're coming Columbia 47th, if you want to climb up to the bridge, there is a bike lane there already. It's a really narrow bike lane because there's a cliff basically right there.
Exactly.
And then you have a guardrail.
That's what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, so you see the guardrail in here. So that's going to be, we're going to be widening a little bit in there. So we're going to have some, huge retaining walls to widen a little bit that portion. You can't really do much. It was just way too expensive to widen that area for a little bit of a bike lane. But it's going to be a protected, not protected, but buffer, 7-foot bike lane on this side of the bridge. On the north side of the bridge. This is coming from 47th to the bridge. And then you have the two 12-foot, 13-feet travel lanes. And then you have the 10-foot multi-use path. And in some cases here, I think it widens to a 12-foot sidewalk. But this is on the north side of the bridge. And then when you come to the bridge, there's going to be obviously a ramp to get to the bridge, and then you'll have the same 7-foot, a sidewalk. It's actually, this is only for bicyclists. I mean, pedestrians will probably take it if they want to, but it's designed for bicyclists. And then you'll have the 10-foot multi-use path on this side. This rendering on the bridge doesn't actually show the fence, but then we're going to have a protected fence on top of the rail. And then when you come over here, this was very difficult to figure out because we have those ramps that go to Lombard. So we're not able to do sidewalk because during the design, ODOT basically said, if you're going to touch the ramps, you need to build sidewalks all the way to Lombard. And that was, outside of the scope of our project. And they have their own standards, and it was just way too complicated. But you can see here that we're in this area, we are having a 7-foot bike lane and a 3-foot buffer. And so this is going all the way to Holman Street. And there's more details on how those bike lanes go to the Holman intersection that I can share with you outside of this.
That's good.
The
Thank you,
plans
thank you.
are there's so much going on, and there's little space to put in here, but that's kind of the idea. So you have bike lanes on both sides. I'll
Great.
stop.
Thanks for clarifying. I wasn't sure. I just wanted to clarify that going south from Columbia, that's going to get changed.
Yeah. So like I said, this was the missing link. So once this project is done, you'll have bike lanes and sidewalks all the way from basically Killingsworth, 42nd, 47, all the way to Cornfoot, Alderwood, 82nd, all the way to the airport.
Very great. Yay.
Awesome. Given that we are 1 minute shy from closing out this meeting, I just want to again thank you all. I see some excitement in the project bringing cycling access and the ability to do some of this work. So folks just wanted to ensure that the safety of those detours stand. So yeah, feel free to continue to send your questions to Winston or myself, and obviously, but Winston as the project manager would be your best person to communicate those out. So definitely let us know. I did put on the chat as well all the links, some of all the links of all the different projects, but we'll make sure to follow up with you all as well via another newsletter update. Thank you. I will officially be closing out the meeting. So I just want to appreciate everyone again for joining us again. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, everyone.
Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Good night.